We were celebrating our 20th anniversary in a fancy restaurant. I noticed something unusual. My wife was sending messages, and I saw one message that says 11 p.m. usual place. That's when I realized that my wife of 20 years was cheating on me.
When she was exposed in front of everyone, she decided to jump into the river, a closure I never expected.
The champagne glasses met with a delicate musical chime as my brother-in-law concluded his toast. He held his glass high, his voice warm with celebration. "To Daniel and Victoria," he declared, smiling broadly. 20 years and still going strong. Applause rippled around the table. Laughter followed, light and effortless, rising toward the vaulted ceiling, where crystal chandeliers cast soft golden reflections over the faces of our closest family members. The private dining room at Leonard's shimmered with understated luxury, polished silverware, immaculate linens, soft candlelight. Everything arranged with intention, everything curated. I lifted my glass, smiled when expected, and took a measured sip. The champagne was rare, expensive, and utterly tasteless to me in that moment. 20 years, 2 decades of shared history, carefully constructed piece by piece. Our brownstone in Brooklyn. The investment firm Victoria and I had built together, from a cramped rented office into a respected boutique agency managing portfolios that once would have been beyond our reach. And Olivia, our daughter, now a freshman at Columbia, stepping into a future we had once imagined for her together. From the outside, it was a portrait of success, stability, devotion, a life polished to a high sheen and placed on display like a museum exhibit of achievement. And museum exhibits, I thought, are designed to be observed, not lived. Across the table, Victoria embodied everything a man might admire. At 45, she possessed a presence that still commanded attention the moment she entered a room. Tonight, she wore a fitted black dress that accentuated her posture and movement with quiet precision. Her blonde hair fell smoothly past her shoulders. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, the set I had given her on our 10th anniversary. She laughed at something my sister said, tilting her head gracefully. But even as she did, her gaze flicked downward toward the phone resting beside her plate. The third time in 20 minutes, our eyes met briefly. She smiled, the familiar smile that once had the power to quicken my pulse. Now it left something colder in its wake, a subtle tightening beneath the surface of calm. "Dad, you okay?" Olivia's voice drew me back. She leaned closer, concern softening her expression. "You look like you're somewhere else." I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Just taking it all in," I said. "Not every day you reach 20 years. She beamed, her warmth effortless and sincere. She carried Victoria's features, but mercifully more of my steadiness. "It's amazing," she said. "You two give me hope. Half my friends' parents are already divorced." If only she understood how precarious the ground beneath us had become. "More wine, sir?" The waiter appeared discreetly at my side. I nodded, allowing the deep red to fill my glass, using the motion to steady thoughts that had occupied me for months. Tonight was a performance, and I would perform. Victoria's laughter rang out again, slightly louder than the conversation warranted. Lauren, her sister, glanced at her with a faint, perceptive lift of one eyebrow. Lauren noticed details, she always had. Victoria's hand drifted toward her phone once more, turning it over without unlocking it. "So, Daniel," my father-in-law said, leaning forward, "I hear the Wilson account finally closed. Persistence pays off." Grateful for the diversion, I shifted seamlessly into professional conversation, discussing market movements, investment strategies, long-term positioning. My voice remained confident, composed, the voice of a man in control of his world. The Wilson account had been a significant achievement. 3 years of careful relationship building had culminated in securing a major portion of a prominent tech entrepreneur's portfolio. It was precisely the sort of victory Victoria and I once celebrated privately, after the obligatory office champagne. When I had told her the news, she had nodded politely, distracted. "Excuse me," Victoria said suddenly, rising from her seat with her purse already in hand. "Ladies' room, Jess, want to come?" Lauren stood as well, and the two disappeared toward the rear corridor. I watched them go, noting how Victoria's head inclined toward her phone the moment they turned the corner. "She's planning something special," my mother-in-law said warmly, leaning closer with a conspiratorial smile. "Very secretive lately." I returned a measured smile. "Victoria does enjoy surprises." If only she knew how true that was. Victoria was indeed full of surprises, unexpected hotel receipts on days she claimed to be at yoga, conferences that appeared on no legitimate industry calendar. And 2 weeks earlier, the discovery that had shifted suspicion into certainty. A burner phone concealed inside the side pocket of her gym bag. "Dad," Olivia whispered, nudging my arm, "can I try the champagne? Just a sip." "Just one," I murmured, sliding my glass toward her. "And don't tell your mother." She tasted it and made a face. "People actually like this?" "It grows on you," I said, laughing softly. For a moment, genuine warmth surfaced. Olivia had always grounded me. Whatever lay ahead, she would remain untouched by it. Victoria and Lauren returned. Victoria's cheeks were faintly flushed. She sat and immediately lifted her wine glass, drinking deeply. "Everything all right?" I asked casually. "Perfect," she said, though she avoided direct eye contact. Lauren was telling me about their vacation house renovation. Lauren hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Tom finally agreed to redo the kitchen." The evening continued with polished conversation and carefully timed laughter. To any observer, we were a family celebrating a meaningful milestone. My in-laws grew pleasantly sentimental, recounting our wedding day. My brother offered embellished stories from my bachelor party. Plates were cleared and replaced with precision. Through it all, I watched. The slight tremor in Victoria's fingers when her phone vibrated silently, the forced brightness of her laughter, the untouched portions of her meal, uncharacteristic for someone who usually enjoyed food with genuine enthusiasm. By the time dessert arrived, a custom anniversary cake the restaurant had prepared, I had counted 14 glances toward her phone and 2 extended absences from the table. "A toast," Victoria's father announced, standing once more. His expression glowed with pride and emotion. "To my beautiful daughter and the man who has made her happy for 20 years. When you first came to ask for her hand, Daniel, I knew you would take care of her forever." I rose as well, lifting my glass, meeting his gaze with steady composure. Around us, faces shone with affection and certainty. Inside, however, I understood something they did not. Care can look many different ways, protection can require silence, and sometimes the role you play for years is not the role you will play next. Still, I smiled, and I drank. And the celebration continued, flawless and convincing, like every carefully constructed illusion that precedes the moment truth quietly begins to surface. I raised my glass slowly, letting my gaze settle on Victoria across the table. The candlelight flickered between us, softening the room, disguising details that perhaps only I was truly noticing. "To taking care of each other," I said, my voice calm, measured, deliberate. "In all the ways that matter." For a fraction of a second, something shifted in her expression. A flicker so quick most would have missed it. Uncertainty, perhaps guilt, or perhaps simply the strain of maintaining a version of reality that no longer held together as seamlessly as it once had. She lifted her glass in response. "To 20 years," she said quietly. Crystal met crystal again. We drank. Around us, conversation flowed, laughter rose and fell, forks met porcelain. Life continued in its polished, ceremonial rhythm. Then her phone lit up. It happened so quickly that no one else appeared to notice. A flash of light against white linen. A brief glow reflected in the curve of her wine glass. My eyes moved instinctively. A fragment of text was visible before she snatched the device into her palm. "Tonight, same place. 11. She turned the phone face down almost immediately, but the damage, if it could be called that, had already been done. She glanced at me, a sharp, searching look, as if gauging what I had seen. I offered nothing in return, no reaction, no question. Instead, I turned toward Olivia with practiced ease. "So," I asked, leaning slightly closer, "how are the midterms looking? Still confident about economics?" Her face brightened instantly, relieved to be the focus of attention. She launched into an explanation of exam schedules, study groups, a professor she both admired and feared. I listened attentively, nodding in all the right places. The image of the engaged father remained intact. But inside, something settled with absolute clarity. The final uncertainty dissolved. What had been suspicion hardened into fact, not dramatic, not explosive, simply certain. When the check arrived, I reached for it without hesitation, brushing aside my father-in-law's polite objections. Some rituals must be preserved. Some roles must be played to their conclusion. Outside the restaurant, goodbyes unfolded with familiar warmth. Hugs lingered. Promises were made about future dinners, future holidays, future moments that now existed in a different context for me entirely. Olivia wrapped her arms around both of us. "I'm so proud of you too," she said, her voice sincere. "Seriously, 20 years is forever these days." I held her longer than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, unchanged since childhood. That constancy grounded me. We love you, Olivia, I said softly. Call me tomorrow. I will, Dad. She kissed my cheek, then Victoria's, before stepping into the Uber I had arranged. I watched the car disappear into the city's steady current of headlights. When I turned back, Victoria was smiling. That was lovely, she said. Everyone seemed so happy. Yes, I replied evenly, raising a hand to flag our own car. A perfect evening. We rode home in silence. Not the comfortable quiet of two people at peace with one another, but the dense, unspoken silence of two people carrying separate truths within the same space. The kind of silence that presses inward rather than settles gently. Inside the brownstone, Victoria slipped off her heels immediately and moved toward the staircase. I'm exhausted, she said. I think I'll turn in early. It's only 9:30, I observed, loosening my tie. She paused, fingers resting lightly on the banister. It's been a long day, all the socializing. Of course, I said. I might stay up for a bit. Review some work documents. Relief passed across her face with surprising transparency. Don't stay up too late. She descended 2 steps, leaned in, and kissed my cheek. Chanel no. 5 unchanged, unmistakable, lingered in the air. Happy anniversary, Daniel. Happy anniversary, Victoria. I watched her climb the staircase. Her posture remained flawless, the elegant carriage of a former ballet dancer never fully abandoned. It had once captivated me, her grace, her composure, the effortless precision of her movement. Once the bedroom door closed, the house exhaled into silence. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey and settled into the living room's shadowed corner. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, casting pale illumination over framed photographs, wedding portraits, vacations, birthdays. Evidence of a life constructed carefully over time. They looked like artifacts now, preserved moments from a narrative that no longer aligned with the present. I checked my watch, then again. At 10:40, the faint creak of the bedroom door reached me. Victoria's footsteps were nearly silent, but familiarity sharpens perception. She descended slowly, retrieved her coat, paused at the hallway mirror to adjust her hair, and slipped out. I waited until the front door closed before moving. From the window, I watched her walk quickly down the street. Her fatigue had vanished. At the corner, a black Audi pulled to the curb. She entered without hesitation. The car disappeared. I finished the whiskey in one burning swallow and picked up my phone. A contact long dormant appeared on the screen. I typed a brief message. It's happening. I need your help. The reply arrived almost instantly. I'm in, tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Usual place? Upstairs, I moved to the guest bedroom. I had not slept beside Victoria for 3 weeks, offering insomnia as explanation. She had not questioned it. Lying in darkness, I traced the path backward. The gradual distance, new routines, subtle changes in clothing, schedule, attention, patterns obvious in retrospect, dismissed in real time. Anger had come and gone months earlier. What remained was colder, sharper, purposeful. She had made her choice. Now I would make mine. Morning arrived without ceremony. I dressed in casual clothes instead of my usual suit. Victoria remained in bed, or pretended to. She had returned at 2:17 a.m. I had heard everything, the careful entry, the removed shoes, the quiet ascent. The diner in Queens existed in stark contrast to our usual surroundings. Formica tables, vinyl booths, the rich scent of coffee and bacon saturating the air. Honest, unadorned, functional. Marcus DeMarco sat in a back booth, broad-shouldered, composed, unchanged despite the years. When he saw me, he stood and embraced me briefly. Daniel, he said, too long. Thank you for coming, Jay. We sat. A waitress appeared. I ordered coffee and eggs, though appetite was absent. Marcus studied me quietly, the way he always had, observant, patient, waiting. Marcus waited until the waitress moved out of earshot, her footsteps fading into the steady hum of the diner. He leaned back slightly, studying me with the same level, unhurried focus I remembered from years ago. Your message wasn't exactly detailed, he said calmly, but I can make an educated guess. This about your wife? I nodded, wrapping both hands around the chipped ceramic mug in front of me. The coffee was strong, bitter, grounding. Something tangible to hold on to. 20 years, I said quietly, and this is where we are. Marcus didn't offer sympathy. He didn't ask if I was certain or suggest that I might be misreading things. That had never been his style. Emotion could wait. Facts came first. What do you need from me? He asked. Information, I replied. I need clarity, who he is, how long it's been going on, where they meet, everything. His eyes sharpened slightly. You're planning something, he said. It wasn't phrased as a question. I'm protecting myself, I answered evenly. And my daughter. Victoria manages too much of our financial infrastructure. She has influence, relationships, leverage I don't fully control. If this ends the way I think it will, I need to ensure I'm not left exposed." Marcus gave a slow, approving nod. "Smart," he said. "You always were the strategic one." He pulled a small notebook from inside his jacket and clicked a pen into place. "Start from the beginning," he said. "Everything you've noticed, no assumptions, just facts." I laid it out methodically. The subtle behavioral shifts over the past year, changes in schedule, unexplained absences, expenses that didn't align with her stated whereabouts, hotel receipts discovered by accident, the burner phone hidden in her gym bag, the text message from the previous night, the black Audi waiting at the corner. "Partial license plate," I added. "I only caught the last 3 characters." "That's enough to work with," Marcus said without hesitation. "This is what I do now, private investigation, mostly corporate matters, but the process is the same. Patterns lead to proof." He jotted down notes with efficient precision. "How fast can you move?" I asked. "Depends on what we uncover," he replied. "But I understand urgency." He tore a sheet from the notebook and slid it across the table. "Secure line," he said. "Call only from devices she cannot access, no texts, no email." I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my wallet. "What's your fee?" I asked. Marcus dismissed the question with a small shake of his head. "You pulled me out of Fallujah," he said. "Consider this settled." "Non-negotiable," I replied quietly. His expression softened just slightly. "You deserve the truth," he said. "And if someone's trying to dismantle your life, you deserve to walk away standing." We finished breakfast discussing safer subjects. His sons, now in high school, Olivia's adjustment to college, familiar names from our years in uniform. It felt unexpectedly grounding to speak with someone who knew me before success, before marriage, before everything that had been built and now threatened. When we stood to leave, Marcus placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Be careful," he said. "When people feel cornered, they make dangerous decisions." "I can handle Victoria," I replied. "It's not just her I'm thinking about," he said quietly. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one you had before Ramadi," he said. "Like you're ready to burn everything down." He gave my shoulder a final squeeze. "Remember what matters," he added. "Your daughter needs you intact." "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's survival." He nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. "I'll be in touch soon," he said. "Sooner if something breaks." The drive back to Brooklyn gave me time to consider his warning. Was I becoming consumed by this? Possibly. But what drove me was not jealousy, not pride. It was preservation of 20 years of work, of financial stability, of Olivia's future, of dignity. Victoria was seated at the kitchen island when I returned. Laptop open, coffee steaming beside her. She looked up with a practiced smile that felt carefully placed. "You're out early," she said. "Breakfast meeting," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "An old friend." "Marcus DeMarco?" she asked, a faint crease appearing between her brows. "From the army. I didn't realize you were still in touch." "We're not really," I said easily. "He reached out last week. With the anniversary and everything, it seemed like a good time to reconnect." She accepted the explanation with a small nod. "I was thinking," she said, turning the laptop toward me, "we should take a trip, a real anniversary vacation." Images of pristine beaches filled the screen, overwater villas suspended above clear water, impossibly serene landscapes. "Bali," she continued, "or the Maldives, just us 2 weeks away from everything." I studied her face carefully. Was this an attempt at repair or maintenance of illusion? Perhaps even strategic proximity? "It looks beautiful," I said neutrally. "Let me check my schedule." Her smile brightened instantly. "We deserve it after 20 years." "We certainly deserve what's coming," I said. The double meaning passed unnoticed. "I need to stop by the office," I added. "The Wilson paperwork needs attention." "On a Saturday?" she asked lightly. "The market doesn't observe weekends," I replied. "I'll be back for dinner." I did not go to the office. Instead, I drove across the river to a modest electronics store tucked into an unremarkable New Jersey strip mall. The owner, a former client with a reputation for discretion and technical ingenuity, greeted me without surprise. He assembled a collection of devices with efficient professionalism. Compact cameras, triggered by motion. Audio recorders with extended battery life. Network monitoring software capable of capturing activity across connected systems. "This is serious equipment," he observed as he rang up the purchase. "Everything all right, Mr. Preston?" "Upgrading home security," I said smoothly. "Precautionary measures." His expression suggested skepticism, but he asked no further questions. These devices upload to a secure cloud environment, he explained. Encrypted access. Unless someone is deliberately searching for them, they won't be found. That afternoon, while Victoria attended yoga, I installed everything with deliberate care. Cameras positioned to observe common areas without drawing attention. Audio recorders placed where conversations would naturally occur. Monitoring software installed quietly across our home network. If Victoria intended to leave, I needed certainty about more than her departure. I needed to know whether she meant to dismantle everything we had built along the way. Our firm, our savings, our brownstone. 2 decades of disciplined work and shared ambition could vanish quickly if she had been planning an exit strategy behind my back. The possibility was no longer theoretical. It was logistical. As I moved through the house installing equipment, my thoughts drifted backward, sifting through years of memory with clinical precision. I tried to identify the moment something essential had shifted. Had there been a single fracture point? Or had the change been gradual, an erosion too subtle to detect until the structure finally gave way? Had she ever loved me the way I believed she had? Or had I loved a version of her that existed only in my perception? 20 years is a long time to share space with someone, to build routines, create a child, merge identities, and still discover you never truly knew the person beside you. Victoria returned in the late afternoon. Her face flushed from exertion, hair still damp from a post-workout shower. She paused slightly when she saw me in the living room. "I thought you were at the office," she said, placing her gym bag near the stairs. "Finished earlier than expected," I replied, seated comfortably on the couch with a financial journal open in my lap. Calm, domestic, unremarkable. "How was yoga?" "Good, intense." She ran a hand through her hair. "I'm finally getting the hang of the headstand." "Impressive," I said, turning a page. "You've been very committed lately." A flicker of hesitation passed across her expression, almost imperceptible. "It helps with stress," she said. "Keeps me in shape." I looked up and offered a measured smile. "You look great," I said. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." She seemed pleased by the compliment. "Thank you," she said. "I'm going to rinse off again and change. Do you want to go out or order dinner?" "Let's order in," I replied. "I've had enough restaurants for a while." "Perfect." As she climbed the stairs, her phone chimed. Her pace quickened just slightly. The evening unfolded with an eerie sense of normalcy. Thai food containers on the coffee table. A movie playing that neither of us followed. Casual conversation about Olivia's classes, market trends, the shifting autumn weather. It felt rehearsed, 2 performers reciting familiar dialogue without emotional investment. At one point, Victoria rose to use the bathroom, phone in hand. Another small but consistent pattern. When she returned, she settled closer to me on the couch and briefly rested her head against my shoulder. The gesture was intimate, almost tender. I wondered whether it stemmed from guilt, habit, or calculation. I did not pull away. I would maintain my role flawlessly until certainty replaced suspicion. Days became weeks. Information accumulated steadily. Marcus delivered updates with professional efficiency. The man driving the black Audi was identified as Eric Donovan, a Manhattan-based real estate developer. 48 years old, twice divorced. No children, financially successful, socially discreet. Hotel records and financial data confirmed that Victoria and Donovan had been meeting regularly for at least 6 months. Surveillance equipment in our home captured numerous phone conversations, always conducted when she believed herself alone. I reviewed the recordings with detached attention, as if observing a case study rather than my own life. The woman whispering affection in our living room sounded unfamiliar, her voice carrying an intimacy she no longer directed toward me. The revelation of the affair was devastating in theory, but what came next altered everything. It happened on a Tuesday in late October. I had chosen to work from home, an uncommon decision. Victoria was scheduled for a client meeting and expected to return in the evening. I heard the front door open unexpectedly. I checked the security feed on my phone. Victoria entered quietly, scanning the room with subtle caution. She had not anticipated my presence. I remained still, door closed, watching through the camera feed as she moved upstairs. She went directly to our bedroom, then into the adjoining bathroom. From the camera positioned in the hallway, I observed her open the medicine cabinet. She removed a small prescription bottle from her purse. With deliberate precision, she emptied several pills into her palm. Then she reached for a container already on the shelf, my sleep aid tablets. One by one, she replaced several of my tablets with pills from her bottle. Her movements were careful, controlled, methodical. When she finished, she arranged everything to appear untouched, returned the bottle to her purse, and left the bathroom. The realization arrived, not as emotion, but as cold comprehension. This was no longer about betrayal. This was premeditation. I waited until she exited the house again before entering the bathroom. The substituted pills resembled my medication in size and color, but differed slightly in shape. I removed them carefully, sealing them in an evidence bag Marcus had provided for documentation. That evening, I contacted a pharmacist friend who owed me a favor. I delivered the pills discreetly and received his call an hour later. "Daniel," he said, voice tense, "these are prescription-strength benzodiazepines, extremely potent. What would happen if someone took them unknowingly?" I asked. "They'd experience heavy sedation," he replied. "Possibly complete incapacitation for hours. Combined with alcohol, the effects could be dangerous. Why do you have these?" "I'm verifying something for a client," I said. A pause lingered on the line. "If someone is administering these without consent," he said carefully, "that's a serious offense." "I understand," I replied. When the call ended, clarity replaced speculation. Victoria was not merely conducting an affair. She had introduced a mechanism to ensure my incapacitation. Whether the goal was convenience or something more severe remained unknown, but intent was undeniable. The following day, I met Marcus and presented the evidence. He examined the bag silently before exhaling a low, controlled breath. "This crosses a line," he said. "This isn't infidelity. This is calculated harm." "I know," I replied calmly. The emotional storm had passed, only focus remained. "We accelerate. I want everything documented. No delays." Marcus nodded, expression grim. "I'll have a comprehensive report ready by tomorrow," he said. "But with this evidence, you could involve law enforcement immediately." "No police," I said firmly. He studied me, weighing the response. "I won't expose Olivia to public scandal," I continued. "No matter what Victoria has done, I won't have her mother taken away in handcuffs. There's another path." Marcus returned the evidence bag to the table. "Your decision," he said quietly, "but understand this, she is not the person you believed she was." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand," I said. That night, I followed my routine with deliberate precision, aware that every movement might be observed, evaluated, or anticipated. When Victoria handed me my usual sleep aid, with a gentle, almost solicitous smile, I accepted it without hesitation. Years of shared habit had made the gesture ordinary, unremarkable. But as I lifted the pill to my lips, I palmed it discreetly, allowing my hand to fall naturally to my side, before slipping it into my pocket. Later, in the privacy of the bathroom, I disposed of it carefully, ensuring no trace remained. I retired to the guest bedroom and lay beneath the covers, fully alert, eyes closed, breathing slow, measured. The house carried sound in subtle ways at night. Floorboards whispered under shifting weight, pipes murmured. Doors exhaled when opened and sealed again. I had lived within those sounds for 2 decades. I knew their patterns. I knew when something was out of place. Around midnight, soft footsteps approached the guest room. The door opened just enough to admit a thin sliver of hallway light. I kept my breathing steady, allowing my chest to rise and fall with controlled rhythm. Victoria lingered in the doorway. I could feel her presence before I heard her. She stood there watching, confirming, perhaps assessing. After several silent seconds, the door eased shut again. Minutes later, the faint click of the front door reached me. I rose immediately and moved to the window overlooking the street. From behind the curtain, I watched Victoria step onto the sidewalk, her posture composed. No trace of fatigue in her movements. The black Audi waited at the corner, engine idling softly. But she did not enter the car at once. Instead, she leaned down toward the driver's window. Even from a distance, I recognized Eric Donovan's profile in the dim interior light. Their conversation appeared brief but intent. Then Victoria lifted her arm and gestured toward our house. Both of them looked up. A chill traveled through me with surgical clarity. That gesture was not casual. It carried implication, discussion, consideration, perhaps planning. The realization that this man, this stranger, might already possess knowledge of my routines, my habits, even my vulnerabilities, ignited a cold, focused anger I had not felt since my years in combat. But anger was a liability. Emotion clouded judgment. Strategy required distance. I returned to the bed not to rest, but to think. Marcus's final report arrived the following day. It was thorough, meticulously documented. impossible to refute. Photographs captured Victoria and Eric entering hotels on multiple occasions, each image time-stamped and corroborated by financial records. Receipts confirmed reservations. Phone records mapped consistent communication. Audio transcripts from recordings inside our home revealed conversations intimate enough to dismantle any remaining doubt. Yet the most disturbing discovery concerned Eric Donovan himself. He was not merely a real estate developer. His personal history revealed a troubling pattern. Donovan cultivated relationships with affluent married women, gradually embedding himself in their lives. In each documented case, the dissolution of the marriage resulted in significant financial benefit to him. 2 previous relationships had ended with the sudden deaths of the husbands involved. One in a single-vehicle accident under unclear circumstances, another from an unexpected cardiac event later deemed natural. Marcus's accompanying notes were direct. This individual represents elevated risk. At minimum, he is a calculated manipulator. At worst, there is a consistent pattern of financial gain following the removal of marital partners. The timing of these deaths warrants serious concern. The pieces aligned with disturbing coherence. The substituted pills. Victoria's sudden enthusiasm for a remote anniversary vacation. Her increasing involvement in financial decision-making within our company. This was no longer simply betrayal. It was orchestration. I spent the day preparing methodically. First, I transferred a portion of our liquid assets into newly established accounts, solely under my control. Not enough to trigger suspicion, but sufficient to secure stability for myself and Olivia. Next, I revised my will, removing Victoria as beneficiary and designating our daughter as sole heir. Copies of all collected evidence were duplicated and stored across multiple secure locations, both physical and digital. Documentation ensured protection. Then I arranged a family gathering for the following evening. The pretext was Olivia's academic success, her excellent midterm results, a recent research appointment, the true purpose disclosure. Witnesses mattered, truth required context. I invited Victoria's parents, her sister Lauren and her husband, my own sister and her family, and of course, Olivia. Victoria responded positively to the plan, apparently viewing it as a reaffirmation of domestic unity. "Should we reserve Leonard Dan again?" she asked. "Everyone enjoyed it last time." "I thought something more personal," I replied. "Let's host it here, I'll arrange catering." She agreed easily, perhaps believing familiar surroundings provided safety. The next day unfolded in careful preparation. Food was ordered, seating arranged, equipment tested. The presentation, constructed with precision and restraint, waited silently within the system. When evening arrived, the house filled with conversation, laughter, and the gentle clatter of shared comfort. Olivia glowed with pride, animated as she described her academic progress. Victoria moved among our guests with practiced grace, attentive and composed. Watching her, it was difficult to reconcile the woman before me with the one documented in Marcus's report. After dinner, as coffee and dessert were served in the living room, I stood and raised my glass. "I'd like to make a toast," I said. The room quieted, faces turned toward me. "To Olivia's accomplishments," I continued, "which make us deeply proud, and to family what it means, what it requires." I allowed my gaze to move deliberately from one person to another. "Family is built on trust," I said. "On honesty, on the certainty that those closest to us act in good faith." Victoria's smile wavered, almost imperceptibly. "I've prepared something brief," I added, lifting the remote. "A reflection on honesty within relationships." Before she could respond, I activated the screen. The first image appeared, Victoria and Erica entering a hotel lobby, date and time displayed clearly. Color drained from her face as the presentation advanced. Additional images followed, financial records, communication transcripts, evidence layered upon evidence with measured progression. Silence filled the room, dense, immovable. Olivia covered her mouth in shock. Victoria's parents stared in stunned disbelief. Lauren's expression shifted slowly from confusion to comprehension. "Daniel," Victoria's voice trembled as she rose to her feet. "This isn't, you don't understand." "I understand precisely," I said calmly, advancing to the next slide. A detailed image of the substituted pill appeared on the screen. "I understand that this has been ongoing for months," I continued. "I understand that Eric Donovan has a documented history of involvement with married women, whose husbands later died under unusual circumstances." Soft gasps rippled through the room. Victoria's mother emitted a fragile cry. That's absurd, Victoria insisted, panic surfacing in her tone. You're inventing this because you're jealous. I advanced to the final image, a laboratory analysis of the pills. These are powerful sedatives, I said evenly. Identical compounds were found in the system of a previous victim associated with Mr. Donovan. You suggested a remote anniversary trip recently. Was that part of the same plan? This is insane, she whispered, scanning the room desperately. He's lying, he's always been controlling. Victoria, her father said, his voice heavy with grief. Is any of this true? She turned toward him, eyes wide, searching for an anchor that no longer existed. Dad, of course not, she said quickly. He's twisting everything. But the evidence remained, silent, undeniable, illuminating the room with its quiet, irrevocable truth. Stop it, Mom. Olivia's voice was quiet, but the steadiness in it cut through the room sharper than any accusation could have. She rose slowly from the couch. Tears streamed unchecked down her cheeks. Her hands trembled at her sides, as if she were physically holding herself together. Just stop lying. She pointed toward the television, where the final slide still glowed in stark clarity. The evidence was no longer just information on a screen. It had weight now, gravity pulling the air out of the room. Then she turned to me, her expression fractured between devastation and determination. Dad, did you know about all of this? For how long? There was no refuge in denial, no comfort in half-truths. I suspected for months, I said gently. I confirmed it recently. My voice remained calm, though every word felt like it carried the collapse of a lifetime. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Em, but I believed everyone needed to see the truth for what it was. Victoria scanned the room as if searching for an ally, but found only stunned silence and faces marked by disbelief. Something inside her shifted visibly. The frantic denial that had fueled her protests evaporated, replaced by something colder, harder, more dangerous. Fine, she said at last, her voice unnervingly composed. Yes, I've been seeing Eric. Because Daniel stopped seeing me years ago. He buried himself in work. He checked out emotionally. I became invisible in my own marriage. Lauren's reaction was immediate and incredulous. So your solution was to drug him, possibly harm him? Her voice rose in disbelief. Victoria, listen to yourself. You don't understand, Victoria continued, addressing the room at large rather than anyone in particular. 20 years of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect partner in his business, always standing beside him, never ahead of him, always supporting, never leading. Eric appreciates me, he values me. Enough, I said, my tone firm but controlled. This is not about your affair, it's about what you were planning to do. I reached into my jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope, placing it carefully on the coffee table between us. The gesture was deliberate, final. These are divorce papers. They've already been filed. The terms reflect our prenuptial agreement, half of our shared assets. You will have no further involvement in the company. I am requesting full custody of Olivia, though she is old enough to make her own decision about where she wishes to live. Victoria stared at the envelope as if it were something toxic, her face tightening into a mask of disbelief, edged with fury. You think you've won? She asked quietly. You think you've controlled the outcome? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I replied evenly, I do, which is why I've taken precautions. I gestured calmly around the room. Everything that has occurred tonight has been recorded. If anything happens to me, anything at all, the evidence will be delivered directly to the authorities, along with the pills you attempted to substitute and their chemical analysis. The color drained from her face once more. The defiance faltered, replaced by something more volatile, panic edged with desperation. Olivia stepped forward then, positioning herself between us, a protective instinct that should never have been necessary. Mom, I think you should leave now. Victoria looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as a daughter but as a witness. Olivia, sweetheart, you don't understand. I understand enough, Olivia said, her voice breaking. Please, just go. Victoria's gaze moved across the room again. No one came to her defense. Her parents looked stricken, their shock mingled with profound disappointment that words could not contain. Lauren folded her arms, her expression resolute. At last, Victoria grabbed her purse from the couch. This isn't over, Daniel, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. You'll regret this. No, I answered quietly. The only thing I regret is not recognizing who you truly were years ago. She turned and left. The front door slammed behind her with a force that reverberated through the house, long after the sound itself faded. The silence that followed was immense. Olivia collapsed into sobs. I held her as the carefully constructed world she had believed in dissolved around her. The rest of the family hovered uncertainly, moving with awkward compassion through the emotional wreckage of the evening. "I'm so sorry," Victoria's father said eventually, his voice heavy with shame. "We had no idea." "None of us did," I replied. "She was very careful." The gathering dissolved in subdued fragments. Guests departed with quiet words of support, their voices hushed, as though speaking too loudly might fracture what little composure remained. Olivia chose to stay, unable to face returning to campus alone. When the house finally fell silent, I sat in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey. The weight of 20 years settled around me like dust after a collapse. The emptiness felt stark, but also strangely clarifying. Something toxic had been exposed to light. My phone rang. "Marcus." "It's done," he asked without preamble. "It's done." "Be careful the next few days," he warned. "Exposure like that can make people unpredictable." "I've prepared for that." After the call ended, I remained in the quiet, absorbing the strange coexistence of grief and relief. The days that followed moved with mechanical urgency. Legal consultations, security updates, changing locks, comforting Olivia as she cycled between anger, sorrow, and disbelief. Victoria made no direct contact. She communicated solely through legal counsel. A week later, Marcus called again. "Eric Donovan disappeared," he reported. "Closed his accounts, headed west, likely California." "He abandoned her," I said, feeling no surprise. "Of course he did. She's no longer useful to him." "There's more," Marcus continued. "She attempted to access every joint account yesterday, all of them." "She would have discovered most were secured," I said. "Did she try the offshore holdings?" "Yes, she's running out of options." That evening, as I worked in the home office, my phone displayed Victoria's name. After a brief pause, I answered. "You've ruined everything," she said immediately. Her voice was unsteady, slurred by alcohol. "Are you happy now?" "This isn't about happiness," I replied. "It's about consequences." "Consequences?" she laughed bitterly. "You took everything from me, my home, my family." "My money, our home, our family, our money," I corrected quietly. "And you were prepared to take all of it from me, possibly more. The difference is that I acted within the law." A long pause followed. "Eric's gone," she admitted finally, her voice smaller, stripped of fury. "He won't answer my calls." "I'm not surprised," I said. "Men like that rarely stay when circumstances change." Silence lingered between us, heavy with the finality neither of us could undo. "I loved him," she whispered, her voice fragile enough that it almost dissolved in the silence between us. "I really did." The confession lingered in the air, stripped of defiance, stripped of justification. For a moment, I said nothing. Then the question that had lived inside me for months finally surfaced. "Did you ever love me, Victoria? Or was I always just a means to an end?" The line went quiet. Not the soft quiet of reflection, but the heavy, uncertain silence of someone searching for an answer that no longer existed. I thought she might have disconnected. I almost lowered the phone. Then she spoke. "I did," she said faintly, "once a long time ago." The words were not comforting. They were archaeological, like discovering the remains of something that had died long before anyone noticed. "What changed?" I asked. Another long pause followed, stretching into something almost unbearable. "You became predictable," she said at last. "Safe. I needed more than safe." I let that settle. "So, you found excitement with a man who may have been planning to kill me." "I didn't know about those other women," she said quickly, defensively. "I didn't know that was his pattern. I didn't know what he really wanted." "But you knew about the pills," I replied quietly. "You knew what you were doing." She didn't deny it this time. The silence became an admission. "I just wanted you out of the way for a while," she said finally. "So I could think, so I could plan my exit. With half my assets in company shares," I finished for her. "It would have been cleaner than this," she said, a brittle edge creeping back into her voice. "Now look at us. You've won, Daniel. You have everything. I have nothing." "Not nothing," I said evenly. "You'll receive what you are legally entitled to. No more, no less." She exhaled sharply, a sound halfway between laughter and resentment. "You think you're better than me, so moral, so righteous." I said nothing. "But you're empty inside, Daniel," she continued, her voice tightening with bitterness. "You always have been. Without me, you're nothing." Her words were meant to wound, but they landed with surprising softness. "Goodbye, Victoria," I said calmly. "Do not contact me again unless it's through your attorney." I ended the call before she could respond, yet her final accusation lingered in the quiet office long after the connection died. Was she right? Had I built my identity around a life that no longer existed? I looked around at the room, the shelves of files, the framed photographs, the remnants of a partnership that had once felt permanent. The structure of my life had fractured, but the foundation remained. I had Olivia, I had my integrity, I had the truth. It was enough to begin again. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings advanced slowly but steadily, guided by legal precision rather than emotional urgency. Olivia returned to her studies once the initial shock subsided, though she maintained complete silence toward her mother. Victoria relocated to a small Manhattan apartment, living on the financial advance negotiated by her attorney. I immersed myself in work, reconstructing routine as a form of stability. The company thrived despite personal upheaval, and gradually the rhythm of daily life shifted from survival to endurance. I was not happy, but I was grounded. One crisp Saturday morning, Olivia came home to visit. She seemed stronger, steadier, though traces of sorrow remained in the careful way she chose her words. We spent the morning quietly, sharing a late breakfast that felt almost normal. "Let's look at old photos," she suggested afterward. "I need some for a project on family narratives." I retrieved several albums from the bookshelf, and we settled onto the couch together, turning pages filled with preserved moments. There was Olivia as a toddler, laughing at the ocean's edge. Christmas mornings, birthdays, vacations, images of a life that once appeared uncomplicated. "You both look so happy here," Olivia said, pointing to a photograph from a ski trip when she was 8. "We were," I answered honestly. "At least I believed we were." She studied the image thoughtfully. "Do you think Mom was always like that, or did something change her?" I considered the question carefully. "People rarely transform completely," I said. "More often, they reveal different parts of themselves over time." Olivia nodded slowly. "I've been trying to understand it, not to excuse anything, just to make sense of it." "That speaks well of you," I said quietly. "Understanding doesn't mean acceptance. It means you refuse to let confusion define you." We continued turning pages, rediscovering fragments of joy that still existed despite the ending that followed. The act of remembering felt less like reopening wounds, and more like acknowledging that happiness had once been real. I opened my laptop to check messages, while Olivia continued browsing. A news alert appeared on the screen, its stark headline breaking the fragile calm. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered beside me. I read quickly. A woman in her mid-40s had jumped from a Hudson River bridge the previous evening. A witness reported she had stood alone for some time, holding what appeared to be a wine glass before climbing the railing. Her body had been recovered downstream that morning. Identification was pending notification of family. No name. Only a description: blonde hair, black evening dress. Olivia's voice trembled. "Dad, do you think—" "I don't know," I said carefully, closing the laptop. "It could be anyone." But we both understood the significance of the detail that refused to feel coincidental. My phone rang moments later. "Lauren." "Daniel." Her voice was unsteady, heavy with grief. "The police contacted my parents. It's Victoria. She jumped last night." Even with expectation, confirmation struck with physical force. Not because love remained, but because history does not vanish simply because trust is broken. She had been Olivia's mother. She had been my wife. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Olivia is here with me. We saw the news. They need someone to identify her," Lauren continued. "My father can't do it. I was hoping." "I'll go," I said immediately. "Stay with your parents. I'll handle this." After ending the call, I turned toward Olivia. She sat motionless, her face drained of color. "That was about Mom," she said softly. "Yes, I'm coming with you." "You don't need to," I said gently. "This isn't something you should have to see." "She was my mother," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "I need to be there." I recognized the resolve in her expression. It mirrored the determination that had carried me through confrontation and aftermath alike. So, we went together. The process at the police station was efficient, respectful, and unbearably final. Olivia insisted on entering the identification room beside me. I wanted to shield her from that moment, but she stood firm, her hand gripping mine with quiet strength. Closure, I realized, is rarely gentle. It is simply definitive. When we left the station, the afternoon light felt different, sharper, more immediate, as if the world had narrowed into essentials. Life, despite everything, continued forward, and so would we. The detective spoke with practiced gentleness, as though each word had been measured for weight before being offered. He explained that several personal effects had been recovered at the scene: a purse containing Victoria's identification, a small collection of cosmetics, and most striking of all, a crystal wine glass. It matched perfectly with the set from our anniversary dinner at Leonard, down the same delicate pattern we had admired together under candlelight only months earlier. "She took it that night," Olivia whispered beside me, her voice fragile with realization. "I remember seeing her slip something into her purse when she thought no one was paying attention." The observation hung heavily in the sterile air of the room. Details that once seemed insignificant now felt charged with meaning. Fragments of a story we had never realized was unfolding in front of us. The body lay covered on the examination table, a white sheet drawn carefully over everything except the face. The restraint of that gesture, preserving dignity even in death, made the moment feel both intimate and distant at once. Victoria looked strangely peaceful. The tension that had defined her final months was gone, replaced by an expression that suggested a stillness she had not possessed in life for a very long time. Whatever turmoil had driven her choices, it no longer showed. I confirmed her identity quietly. Olivia stood beside me, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength. She did not turn away. She did not falter. Her composure was not the absence of pain, but the presence of resolve. When we returned to the car, the weight of the moment finally broke through her restraint. Olivia collapsed into tears, her body shaking as she tried to speak through sobs. "I was so angry at her," she said. "The last thing I told her was to leave. I told her to just go." I pulled the car to the side of the road and turned toward her fully, gathering her into an embrace that felt both protective and insufficient. "This is not your fault," I said firmly. "None of it. Your mother made her own choices, every one of them. The affair, the deception, everything that followed, and this final decision was hers alone." "But if I had talked to her," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling with guilt, "if I had listened." "No," I said gently but without hesitation. "Your mother's actions were never yours to carry. What she did, then and now, came from her own decisions. You did not cause this. You could not have prevented it." She cried against my shoulder, releasing grief that had been building since the first fracture in our family's foundation. We remained there for a long time, parked quietly at the edge of the street, the world moving around us while we struggled to comprehend something that refused to make sense. Later that evening, after Olivia had fallen asleep in her old bedroom, I sat alone in the living room. The house was silent in a way that felt final rather than temporary. On the coffee table rested the matching twin to the wine glass found at the bridge. I had brought the entire set home after our anniversary dinner, intending them to symbolize continuity, another year, another chapter, another shared milestone. Now the symmetry felt almost deliberate, as if one glass had remained with me, while the other had traveled with her to the end. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey and allowed myself to sit with the enormity of what had happened. Victoria was gone. The woman I had married, built a life with, raised a child alongside, and ultimately realized I had never truly known, had chosen to end her story rather than confront the consequences of her actions. Had she loved Eric deeply enough that losing him shattered her? Or had the collapse of status, wealth, and reputation become unbearable? The answer no longer mattered. The need to understand had faded, replaced by acceptance that some questions do not yield meaningful answers. The following morning, Olivia and I walked through Central Park beneath a canopy of autumn color. The leaves burned in shades of crimson and gold, their brilliance intensified by the crisp clarity of the air. Life, indifferent yet beautiful, continued its cycle. "What happens now?" Olivia asked quietly as we sat on a bench overlooking the lake. "We move forward," I said, "one day at a time." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the water's surface. "Does it make me a terrible person that I'm still angry at her?" she asked. "Even now?" "No," I replied, "it makes you human. Anger and grief often exist side by side. There is no correct way to feel about something like this." After a moment, she spoke again. "I found some photos I want to frame for my dorm room. Happy ones from when I was little. That sounds like a good choice. Not to pretend everything was perfect," she added carefully, "just to remember that there were good times too. That has to mean something." "It does," I said, placing an arm around her shoulders. "The good was real even if it didn't last." We returned home as the afternoon light softened into evening. Olivia went upstairs to gather the photographs, while I checked messages on my laptop. A news article had been updated with additional details about Victoria's final hours. Witnesses reported she had stood by the river for nearly an hour, holding the wine glass, occasionally lifting it as though making a solitary toast. Then she climbed the railing and stepped forward into the darkness below. I closed the article and turned my attention elsewhere. Olivia returned with a small box containing photographs and a pair of worn satin ballet shoes. "They were Mom's," she said softly. "I want to keep them." "Of course," I told her. "Anything you wish to keep belongs with you." That evening, we ordered Chinese food and watched old movies we had once enjoyed together. It was not an attempt to erase what had happened, but an acknowledgement that joy had once existed alongside everything that followed. The next morning, as Olivia prepared to return to her dorm, she hugged me tightly. "We're going to be okay, right, Dad?" "We will be," I said with certainty. "Different, but okay." After she left, the house settled into quiet once more. Yet the silence felt less oppressive than before. Victoria's final act had left pain in its wake, but it had also closed a chapter that might otherwise have stretched on indefinitely. For the first time in a long while, the future felt uncertain but open.